Showtime. I didn't get a chance to really look over the task, but I'll, it's been pertinent, make some response next week. I want to try and get you to push your attention. I'm just going to hint up to an edge that you can hear it. Has something to do with where this sort of thing would next lead, assuming we all live long enough. And if you listen correctly, even just verbally, at least you should be in for a small holiday surprise. If it gets too surprising, I'll back off and I will do trickery and you'll think that I didn't actually say what I said. So we'll slip up a little bit on it. I want you to look at something in a kind of spherical, as a spherical loop, which is another way of attempting to crudely picture an additional dimension at right angles to where ordinary attention is. But it would be similar to, and I'm back inferring that we're in the ball field of the so-called three forces, that if you had three spheres and you could play as though reality were like a cartoon and the three spheres could float and they could pass through each other in all sorts of formations. That is still, of course, disregarding the question as to where might these three spheres be floating, because then you've got another something, because there's something in which they have to exist. But I wanted you to try and create a new kind of yellow circuit controlled featurization of there being like three spherical loops, but not going in a linear sequence, not any more than would appear to be the circuitry in humanity. That from one quick view, it would seem as though my descriptions of humanity being driven by three circuits, and even drawing them in two dimensions of the red and then the blue and then the yellow on top of that, that indeed, if you gave it that kind of ordinary thought, that indeed would seem to parallel the kind of development that ordinary humans go through. That at first they seem to be no more than just an eating and defecating machine. Then they seem to develop, the little nippers seem to develop some sort of emotion, and they smile and they giggle and recognize faces. And then if you were the state, made them go to school, they apparently develop some kind of yellow circuit wherewithal that they can read and write. And it would appear to actually go in some kind of, not only linear, but time-wise in a sequence. And also, as I point out, that is the history of humanity. Then you could take just your ordinary knowledge of recorded history and believe that surely that too seems to have gone through a progression of it being very feral, belly-oriented people, creatures at some time, and then they moved into that being tempered by apparent human emotions, regardless of human activity, of people saying we should be kinder to our neighbors and we should not kill our fellow caveman. And that would seem to have moved into an area wherein man is more sophisticated, if not more intellectualized. But also you have to, that's why I bring up a kind of spherical loop, realize that all of that is all true on one level. Everyone on this planet is not operating from a center of the yellow circuit. Those who apparently would have their primary center of gravity in the yellow circuit, mechanically, even they do not operate continually in the yellow circuit. I refer you back to last week's picture of the overall underlying party, that at that party, everything is possible simultaneously. And there is no doubt that you, any ordinary seat of consciousness, can turn at this party and find groups of people, if not an individual, Find groups of people that would just seem obviously, based upon my detailing of it, they're obviously engaged in yellow circuit activity over here. A whole lot of talk, very little action, very dry. It's just no doubt this is a manifestation of yellow circuit people. And over here, those rowdies knocking over the potted plants, turning up the music, blowing out speakers. What little talk they do have is about football, obviously yellow circuit people. But we are back to OAI consciousness is being drawn to something, and as far as consciousness is concerned, as you all know by now, the problem is to keep remembering it. It takes what it's looking at as being the statement of reality. What a fucking party, a bunch of wound up, wound down people from Alabama talking about football and drinking beer. What a party. This is not my kind of place, and that is not the party. And an ordinary consciousness can turn right around and believe that it is confronted with people there discussing their love life and how many times they've been married and divorced and what a pitiful situation. You think, well, whatever blue circuit people might be, if that's not them, that will do until the mule train gets here. While forgetting what a split second before consciousness was taking as being the definitive statement of the party. So trying to keep all that in mind is why I'm referring to it as a spherical loop, that it is not one perforce denying the simultaneous existence of another, and it is not that they cannot merge in such a way that if consciousness could see between its breaths, if it could see between the pulsations, it would see that suddenly one thing turned into another. But I want you to try and neuralize it in a certain way. These three spherical loops, I'm going to drag it out in 4 or 5 directions before I slip upon you with a holiday surprise. You could almost look at it as being a kind of, or 3 kinds of spherical loops of mortal assistance into life's growth. And the first one would appear to be a spherical loop. I'm going to use in the beginning rather mundane terminology. It would appear to be a kind of spiritual / emotional pleasure that one group of the partygoers seem to receive from what would appear to be a sense of hope. Now, this is where you find what ordinary consciousness would refer to as the saints of all kinds. Would-be occult people that seem to smile, and they're verbally written, their written messages seem to be, God loves us all, no matter how this thing appears. The gods know what's going on, especially our great leader, he knows what's going on. And from a distance, look how sweet he looks. We don't have any first-hand knowledge of any dastardly deed that he's ever done. And there seems to be a kind of pleasure in feeling as though there is a certainty somewhere, if not within this realm of existence, somewhere outside this party. Perhaps someday there'll be a future party to which I'll be invited, that all of this will be cleared up. A second spherical loop it would seem to be humanity drawn into a kind of mechanical assistance to life's growth would more rightly appear to be described as a kind of concentration, a kind of study, and it would appear to be, within certain bounds, a joy over some kind of specific knowledge. Now, this is mechanically where life has been striving to go in the fields of, in the edges of the field, I should point out, of religion, and it has moved into psychology being truly the unstated religion of today. It is what I have semi-facetiously pointed out, that the Unitarian Church, not just that per se, but that segment of the party, that life has attempted in small ways, not just in the 19th and 20th century, not just limited to the Unitarian movement, but running in small little currents throughout history, has been the apparent attempt of life to come up with a religion of some kind that would be in this spherical second loop. It would not be just a sense of blind pleasure. I feel better. It seems as though I've received a message. It seems as though I have been drawn to some group or to some teacher, some minister, some rabbi, some religion that says, look, I know things do not look good right now. And I know you got your problems, and God knows I have mine. But look right here, the God's told me that you wait till you die. Just wait. Just hold on until you can die, and it'll be all right. Now, it is not simply, I remind you, just a linear progression. It is getting stronger now. But life has now put forth within its own body groups of people to whom that is no longer acceptably satisfying. That I would like to know a little more. So it would apparently, in a sense, move from a realm that could be described generally as religious into something that would be a little more specific. It would be based not upon faith of some kind, but upon knowledge. Now, the third loop I would refer you to is where all of this must end up. It is what your proper and necessary condition is. And that's simply directly seeing what's going on. It's no faith in anything. It is not simply the joy of hearing me detail week after week an apparently non-ending series of descriptions and new twists, new mappings. It is to simply turn around and directly see what is going on. Now, what I have just covered, let me re-outline it simply. The first loop would be like a psychological, or would be like a spiritual / psychological loop. The second one would be like a loop of mathematics. But the third loop would be like a loop of physics. Now, some months ago when I threatened to come up or to lead you into the world of mathematics, listen quick, it's not all that confusing, but it sounds so. I was about to lead you out of the world of mathematics. Because in one real sense, to varying degrees, all of you have been exposed to this. Some of you sort of came in at the tail end of me going through a period of time with the original people here, with what amounted to the first loop. Some of you have gone back. We've got 5 big notebooks of things I wrote for them back then, but it was almost, from your viewpoint now, you should be able to see it was almost as though it were a quick run through the entire history, the entire wandering of the lost tribe, going through the forbidden land, looking for the promised land in the universe of emotion, of religion, an apparent detailing of the individual human position. But then for the last number of years, since most of you have been here, what you walked into, even though I was not necessarily using mathematics, was getting into the second loop. That it was specific maps, equations, and no longer what should have appeared to you for any length of time was no longer that which seemed to be a kind of continual retelling, renoticing of the individual human condition. To properly go through this kind of traveling through those 3 spheres, is you've got to have some knowledge by now and some feel for what is the ordinary purposes of religion / psychology in the ordinary world. how it is inherent in all of you. How it is that periodically I can say, for the next few weeks, write me, if you care to, what would apparently be old-time psychological questions. But now you should have some feel and some knowledge on your own that in truth is kindergarten, that in truth is distracting, and yet the need is already inherent in all people, that I want to have some kind of knowledge about myself. I want some sort of assurance. In times past, religion without the slight psychology, the religions, all of you have as much knowledge of religion as I do. Throughout the world, the religions were always on the basis that sure things stink. And then offering some reason, all the way from man's transgressions to the God's follies and the capriciousness of gods. But that man's position was not all that hot. But there's some kind of alternative. Now, don't despair. Don't curse the gods. Don't kill yourself. Don't become an alcoholic. Now, come to church. We're all in the same boat. You're among friends. We're all disturbed. Everybody has family members die. Everyone gets sick. Everyone's going to die. But look right here. The gods at one time sent down a word, blah, blah, blah. Then it's now religion/psychology. And I repeat, it is not simply a linear process, and it's not simply time-wise, because religion, there are people right now on this planet, in this country, in this state, in this city, that to a degree, they are still back where humanity was in general 5,000 years ago. That seems to be the point of their existence right now, that they have not surpassed that loop. It's not an attack on them, nothing is wrong. It's simply a statement that life still needs it. That it still needs a sizable number of people that would look at, I shouldn't even say this, they would look at the Unitarian Church, if they heard anything about it, just probably read 2 or 3 sentences. The Unitarians stating, here's what Unitarians are. They take about 2 sentences and they say, wait, now here is the living work of evil forces and the devil. All these things about a Unitarian is somebody who doesn't know whether there's a God or not. Give us a break. These people are not Christians. They're dangerous. And we don't, a real Christian or a real Jew, a real religious person doesn't need that kind of obscure, what do they call that, philosophy or some crap of questioning what's going on. You look right here in the Quran. You look right here in the Bible. You look right here at what our Guru said. You don't need that. Those people still exist. Large numbers of them. They simultaneously exist with it moving into religion/psychology. That those that now might be driven to deny that they're particularly religious would look at psychology as offering an alternative. That sure, you don't feel good, the psychiatrist says to him. Hell, I don't feel good. You got problems? I'm in analysis. I go to a doctor down here. I go to a psychiatrist. So there's nothing to feel bad about. Did you bring your check? Now lay down or sit down and let's talk. And they're not quite as blatant, as a rule they have not been, as the church has been, about they guarantee everything is all right. Except the only problem is, I point out, is you ask them where the refund counter is after death, and they don't know where to direct you. But psychology, psychiatry, in a more inferred manner, is that it's not a matter of getting well, but we can all feel better. There are alternatives to you suffering. When you say that you believe your main problem is your great hostility toward your mother. All right, that's very common. Look at these books up here. Half the books on my wall have to do with cases of people who felt hatred toward their mother. So to begin with, do not feel as though you're an outcast. Some of the world's finest people, I'm sure, hated their mother. So you're in good company. So what is offered, again, is a possible alternative. That you're not alone, and you do not have to feel this way. You can feel differently. The next stage, again, is not linear. But all of you have to have the ability to go through all of that. It does not, in some cases, you can go through it like that. But as then there has to be produced at the party those that begin to assist life into the second spherical loop, it would move more into the realm of what I'm calling for this evening mathematics. Not religion/psychology, but mathematics. Now that's what I have been doing for the last several years. Not strictly. I keep going back and forth. Sometimes I tell you to watch it. Sometimes that's when I say I'm fixing to say this, and it's not true, and it sounds like it's true. It's all superfluous, but it appears to be true. It's to have a starting point to try and get you to look somewhere else. The world of mathematics is the more obscure to some of you things I've been doing for the last several years. But it has to do now not with a feeling of assurance of some kind, or not just someone, not me just saying, through trickery or through the weight of my great charm and personality to tell you, listen, everything's all right. I'm in touch with the gods, and don't worry, stick with me, and things will get better now or later. Now, you could have gotten that anywhere. You should have already been through that to some degree. But then it has to be a matter of not just a mechanical feeling, a greater feeling of safety. That, well, all right, there are alternatives. Even if I don't achieve it, even if I do not become very religious, even if I do not go through analysis long enough that I get over all of these unconscious motivations, etc. At least I know that things could be differently. It's possible. The second loop has to do with the need to know that what appears to be my individual situation, what appears to be my individual problem, other people's individual problem, is no individual problem at all. To begin with, it's not individual. That's not bad enough. Secondly, it's not a problem. It is a condition of growth. It is life growing through man, and it is man being forced to grow. It is man being forced to expand and extend himself at a rate that apparently does not match the hunger of his own yellow and blue circuit during his lifetime. That is, everybody wants to be different, and you can't be different in one lifetime, mechanically. But it's to begin, through all of my trickery and your own effort, to begin to see what I point out, that it's blatant, which makes it doubly interesting, that life is not going downhill. It is not a matter of devolution. It is not a matter that all of society is about to fall apart, that all the major and minor powers are not about to create an Armageddon. And yet, you can get a glimpse of that. It does not take a mystical, well, it almost takes a mystical ability, but you don't have to fall down and foam at the mouth. You just have to fool around here long enough with me and give it some attention, and it just strikes you that, an aside, I assume everyone noticed, if you want to see the blatant, excellent health of life, is your grandfathers and grandmothers were killed by the common cold. And now they have a mechanical heart. There's a guy sitting around with a machine that if they unplug it, is doing what this great thing that allegorically at least, sometimes I guess it was literal in the past, to believe that that was the heart of all life, that the gods live there. Now they put together a bunch of stuff from a plumbing supply store, and the man's alive. He got a bunch of just running from his chest, and he's alive. 30 years ago, people were just dropping for all sorts of things that nowadays amount to nothing. Just another, I couldn't resist pointing that out. But to get a glimpse, without any doubt, and you can feel it, I don't have to prove it, and it's not a historical lesson of some horizontal kind. But will begin to strike you that yes, it is just obvious. Things are not going downhill. They're going uphill so fast, in a sense, they go faster than you can see. Before you know it, something's happened. You know, for all we know, somebody now has a mechanical liver operating. It just hadn't made the headlines yet. The second spherical loop, is to begin to have a knowledge on your own that what appears to be the individual condition, the individual problem, is neither individual, nor is it properly, or should it properly be labeled as a problem. It is a manifestation, it is a side effect of growth. It is partially a side effect of ordinary consciousness is inability to conceive of a dimension that goes at right angles to ordinary attention. That wherever it is held, that is a statement of reality. And wherever it is held a moment later is another statement. This second spherical loop, instead of it being, as I said, referred to, or me referring to it as a spiritual or religious or psychological area of assistance, the second one would be more like the mathematics of it. It's wherein the maps, the equations, begin to suggest most strongly an underlying paradigm to everything, not to one person's position, not to your position, but that there is an underlying fabric, there is an underlying grid, that no matter where an individual apparently is standing with his so-called personal problems, that underneath everyone's feet is a seamless piece of fabric, and it is offering a paradigm to everything. The third spherical loop should be referred to carry my terminology further, is the physics of it. And that gets into actually seeing the basic operations. It's no longer in the ordinary sense. It is no longer in any way connected with so-called faith, any kind of feeling of emotional or would-be spiritual assurance and hope. And it is no longer simply equations and maps, which right now the equations and maps, in a sense, have been homegrown by yours truly. To get anywhere, you have to start planting your own. You have to find your own little harvest here and there. But it's me conjuring this up. It is me making up this world of the mathematics of it. And as some of you periodically note, your great pleasure. Somebody even lately said their continual shock. They put surprise and they marked out and put shock. That week after week I can do this. That they said in all respectful humility and goodwill, that they periodically think that I have surely, of course now this is them experiencing themselves, but they've been nights that they thought surely I had reached some kind of climax. That what I had drawn out, what I had come up with, just staggered them for days. It just seemed to offer the possible answer to everything. They could just smell that if they could pull this together, it would answer everything. That surely next week I'd have to say, well, I don't have anything else to say, or we're going to start all over. And then next week I did it again. That is not the end of it. It is tied in with me saying, threatening that this eventually has to move into a more public area. The next stage is just absolutely the physics of it, of seeing it. Which I can make it sound more mystical, sitting here under these conditions. But most of you have already had glimpses. But you just saw something. The first few times, understandably, you want to communicate something to me, or just a string of explicatives. You just want to say something, and there's nothing to say. I just saw. I'll see if I can deliver a piece of the present. In regard to the three forces, in spite of the reality of it, does everyone understand I made it up? There is the reality of it, and yet it's unnecessary. The reality of it exists in the second spherical loop, the mathematics of it. Because when you see it, there's no such thing as the three forces. Of course, you may have some flashbacks without the benefit of LSD, that some of my words will come back of me saying they don't exist in isolation, and if you see them, they don't really exist. They only exist in the second sphere. They only exist in the mathematics of it. The three forces exist, but their existence is limited to the second sphere, the mathematics of it. To go beyond that, they no longer exist. I'll give you a quick, crude parallel, which they all are. To go from the first sphere into the second, from the apparent world of religion/psychology into the mathematics of it, then gods no longer exist. But if you're in the first sphere, gods do exist. Those of the party still assisting life in that second spherical loop are operating on the basis of gods. And the gods are real. The people are not befuddled. They're not deluded. They're certainly not in need of some smart aleck from some other corner of the party to go over and say, "Tut tut on you people. Boy, is that old-fashioned. You still believe that there's an old man somewhere with a beard living in the clouds? I'm just astounded. It's people like you holding back the march of progress." There's just simply no such thing. It's just superstition. That's not true. It is true to those operating in the second sphere that I can't see gods anymore. They don't exist. Right. And what my crude parallel I was giving you is the three forces exist in the sphere that I have labeled the mathematics of it. But when you get into the physics of it, three forces don't exist, because then you're peering into the underlying fabric of it. That still wasn't the gift. Here it comes. In an extended sense, I'm talking about extended from the third sphere. I'm not going back to the first. But in the extended sense, I'll have to parenthetically break up my sentence once again and point out that in the world of the physics of it, there would be no talking about it. And so I'm dragging it back to the world of mathematics to even talk about it. So remember that. That even this is not true, but here it comes. To extend beyond the third sphere, or the physics of it, or into the third sphere, extension beyond where I have taken it now, there is evil. But you are back to me having to point out to you that the direct seeing of it, the physics of it all, would be truly beyond any of the mathematical sphere. That is, of talking about it, me diagramming it, me pulling out examples, me changing the terminology to see that in a way that is beyond debate, in a way that cannot correctly be described in words, man is a reflection of life itself. And that life itself is as full, and these words are not correct, remember, is as full of uncertainty and inner conflict as you are. And so although I have gone to great pains in the sphere of mathematics to point to you, there's no such thing as evil. There are no evil people. Everything is necessary for life. In an extended sense, And in a minute, and I remember I may back up and make you think I didn't actually say that. That's not hard. But beyond all that, there is a kind of evil. And it's not that hard to see. It's what everybody thinks they've been seeing before, but it's not for the reason they thought. It is the continuing, within life itself, waves of unprofitable action. But life cannot help its own devolutionary tendencies any more than you can. And you make a mistake if you are entertaining voices that believe that, all right, the kind of self-doubts, the kind of self-incriminations, the kind of apparent ambiguities that still haunt me is simply a sign of my specific weakness. If that's true, then you're also detailing the specific weaknesses of this thing to which we all owe our life. If it falls, we go. The very things that humanity has always believed, starting at the first sphere onward, that there are urges and tendencies, daydreams in me that are evil. It's beyond any doubt, the religion, the witch doctor, says that such things are evil, and I can feel it. There's no doubt. I may not be able to stop it. He tells me I should not be screwing my neighbor's wife. I believe it. There's no doubt. I can't argue it. I may continue to do it, but I'll continue to suffer over it. And if anybody asks me, or if I'm alone by myself, I'll continue to think that's not right. I may continue to try and steal food from my neighbor. But something tells me it's wrong. And of course, there has always been within the body of life verification of it. Religion verified it. Psychology now verifies it as self-destructive behavior, unprofitable interpersonal relationships. But life cannot stop it because things do not run by the straight line. What makes, from another viewpoint, the wonder of man is that man is being fed information directly from a higher level in life than any other creature you can see now. Information wherein humanity is condemning life, whereas in a sense it has no right to. Because every time humanity is condemning itself, that is, you're condemning yourself or you're condemning someone else. If there was such a thing as blasphemy, that would be it. And yet life has made man do that. Every time you feel as though, how dare people act in that manner? How dare someone say such an outrageous thing? If there was such a thing as blasphemy, that would be it. And yet life is making humanity do it. I don't guess anyone would want to ever come up with the idea that man might in some strange way be life's conscience. Well, you'd have to have an extended definition of what a conscience was. It's not a little spirit that the God's put in you to tell you right from wrong. See, I already explained that away in the last 2 minutes, if you were listening. The very things that humanity has always condemned as being evil within themselves and within others, in a sense, is a fact, except it cannot be stopped, and evil is not the right word for it. Deflow. Recoiling mode. But since it's a holiday season for some of you people, I thought I'd go ahead and tell you what the hell is evil. Except I may require that everybody forget that by next week. Do you find it curious, if you were off on your own trying to neuralize this, off on side streets, that all of the religions, all of the would-be mystical groups of all shapes, sizes, all have common areas, that it's not a surprise at all, of behavior, attitudes that they all condemn? Without question. There's no excuse. A man, a woman cannot do this and be a good person. Be a blank. Fill in whatever you want. You cannot do this. And yet life continues to do it. And yet those involved, those who say, I am here to bring the message that we should not do this, they admit, I can't stop it. If life can't stop it, you can't stop it. But to be properly involved with this, you have to get past the first two loops. And you have to be able to force yourself into alignment with all and anything that opposes the D mode. You have to align yourself with every and anything that opposes solitary, wasteful, unprofitable behavior. If I could slide any of you people's attention real quickly into the question of those kind of three spheres and where they might be floating, that's where I was about to jump right now. Because remember, it's not in a straight line of any kind. It's not even in a line in the three-dimensional world. Like the spherical loop, number one I mentioned, of those at the party, those that life uses to experience a feeling of safety and pleasure over the sensation of hope and faith that there may be an alternative to this. And it doesn't require any knowledge. I don't want to know anything else. I don't need to understand. I don't need somebody to give me a lesson in dry academic theology. It's enough that a man of the cloth, a man of the gods, hollered, everything will be all right, stick with me. And everybody around me went, yay. Some of them cried, some of them cheered, and it felt right. Who am I to? I feel good. I like that. I don't need any further discussion. Going into the realm in which the three spheres may float, can any of you get a sensation that for me to start this publicly, that into another dimension, that's still what people want? Except you can't go back. And what would have to be done nowadays would be present the physics of it all while making it appear, in a sense, to still be the first sphere. That apparently this manifestation would have brought them back into some kind of comforting feeling of a religious experience of some kind, while it was nothing of the sort. And while it was everything of the sort. but now into the sphere where it is the physics of it all, and yet they do not, to expand this to any degree, they do not have the need to even go through the sphere of the mathematics of it. What they want now, and I'm saying they want is what life is needing, is a brand new laying on of the hands, a brand new story, a nice simple story. Do any of you, when I talk about having to expand this, do any of you really imagine that this would just keep growing in this kind of manner, and finally we get a big, huge place somewhere, and there's several thousand people every week sitting, and this same kind of thing go on? Do any of you really imagine that that's what will happen? Or since I ask it to you in this way, with all my hinting, do you imagine it could be done? Do you imagine that kind of scenario is actually possible? That this could go into thousands, let's say just 1,000, let's try that. 1,000 people every week, and this same sort of thing, whatever it is, seem to go on. Hint, hint, hint. Do not, of course, take your logical voices that might say, well, it's a matter of this or that. No, it's not. But what if it's just simply not possible? It's not pertinent, it's not necessary, that's not the way it would work. If it gets much bigger, what they want is a new story, a new laying on of the hands, a new assurance. Except it can't be the same old one. Perhaps now might even be the time to bring back up, I've presented this kind of rhetorical question to some of you before. When it gets into the horizontal flow of all forms, those people that apparently are the men of the cloth, the men of the gods, out into the horizontal flow, as necessary as it still is, which all you've got to do for the time being is look at its prevalence, and there is the degree of its necessity. Can any of you begin to get your own glimpse of the fact that those in the horizontal flow, they're apparently men of the gods, are actually aligned with the D mode? In other words, if you listen real quick, since it's holidays, those involved in the horizontal flow of religion are working for the evil force. Because it is the heart, it always has been, under whatever name, of a stabilizing influence on the growth of life. That you still have people dressed up in these strange uniforms. When I say strange uniforms, if you're not a Catholic, you look at the Catholics and you think, good grief, it looks like Halloween. And likewise, you go into a temple, if you weren't exposed to that, you might think, well, what in the world are they doing? Or turn on your television and see these freelance ministers that God sent with a pressing message, especially this country is about to fall apart, we're all going to kill ourselves. And all they're doing is stabilizing the uncertainty of continual growth, and they're still condemning things that it's, in a sense, taking the party as a whole, that's too late. They're still condemning things that the day has passed, in a sense, if you can see it. That the things they're condemning, the things they're saying, art that God, our God said, don't do this because it's written right here. The Word of God doesn't change. The truth doesn't change. And if you had the ability to see into the third sphere, you had the ability to see in the four dimensions, you had the ability to get outside the party or to back away to a far wall and open your eyes and never blink and don't take a breath and suddenly see it all, you would see that, all right, here is part of life talking and condemning certain behavior, and you can see fully that it's too late. The day has passed. Life is not going in that direction. You can find, all of you can find the same thing going on in you. That the things in you that you still periodically, the voices come out and say, ooh, and you suffer over it. And if nothing else, I hate to give you a way out because there's no way out, but just horizontal age, some of the things you used to worry about. It just periodically come to your attention. I don't spend all my time worrying about, could I ever save the money and get my nose fixed or get a hair transplant now I'm hitting 40, and now I seem to want is, 15-year-old girls, and they won't look at me. And suddenly it's like, well, here I am 43. I'm using men, women, you've got your own version of this. Here I am 43, and you suddenly realize, I should do something about my looks. When I walk around, I look worse than, but at least I don't worry about how I look anymore. And yet periodically the voice will come back from some room of the party. Did anybody hear any of that? That's just mechanically. The same thing goes on at a different speed, at a different level, of course, in life itself. And it has those apparently, quote, men of the gods, still preaching about we have got to not do this. They're condemning this, saying we've got to return to former values. No, we ain't got to, we can't. It's not simple, of course. It's not that suddenly all of life is going to go in this direction. But once you can begin to see in additional dimensions, is what I inferred you about the ideas of reading the future and being mystical. It's just, it's nothing. It's just simply see what's going on. And it's not mystical. And you can't be a mystic because you forget to tell anybody. After you once realize you can't tell anybody, you don't go around telling the future, because the future you could tell anyway wouldn't make any sense. And they'd say, well, so what? That's not as good as Jean Dixon, that kind of crap you just told me. Look here, she said that Teddy Kennedy was going to be in a plane crash within 2 weeks of his birthday next year. Now that's what I call predicting. And this kind of crap you're giving me doesn't make any sense. What I started to point out, there is a way in which all of these loops turn back upon themselves, it would appear. Now, it is not that simple in reality. But I was using that one example that it would apparently be that everyone starts out to assist life by looking for the first loop. How can I join in that part of how can I plug myself into that loop and get some assurance so I don't feel so uneasy, so I don't fear death, so I don't feel like I'm here alone and nobody loves me. God loves you, and you join up with us, and we all love you. They're there. There's an alternative. We may not be able to experience it now. But even though I told you there was not a simple linear progression, there is some kind of progression, right? Because none of you were satisfied with that, and I'm certainly not involved with that. And then it got into what I'm calling the second sphere, the mathematics of it. It apparently begins through all of this confusion, this obtuseness, that things begin to make sense. That you begin to see things and can even formulate your own kind of map of aha. It is not a personal problem of mine. It is not a personal problem of somebody else. You begin to get glimpses. It's like opening up not just a small door that only lasts one breath. It's like 2 or 3 doors open at once, and you see 2 or 3 things going on. And it's almost you can look down the door and you can see their feet are all on the same piece of tapestry. Everybody's staying on the same grid. And you realize if I just looked in this one door at him or these group of people, now I close that door and I looked over here, and I looked at them, and I closed that door and I looked over here, I would think it was 3 different things going on, to say the very least. I mean, one of these things had nothing to do with the other one. Until you get all 3 doors open and you can look, maybe get your head in and you look around, and all 3 are in the same room. They're on the same piece of underlying fabric. They're not unrelated. But they're also not related mathematically. That is, you can't go back and tell somebody, did you know what's going on over here is directly connected with that? Prove it. Well, just give me a hint. Because the truth is, if you're ordinary and get a glimpse of that, the first time somebody says prove it, that disproves it. Because then you were left with, well, wait, you misunderstood me. I didn't actually mean they were really connected, when they are. But then this little loop, the series of loops seems to go back upon itself, and what would be an additional stage, an additional progression, what I was pointing out to you, in a sense, is still back to the starting line that people still want, quote, here I am, the God sent a reassuring message. They sent a new message. The old one, they just sent you part of it. It's been worn out, or they decided to reveal a little bit more, and here it is. And it would apparently be back to the first spherical loop of just a feeling of certainty, a feeling of safety, and I don't want any further discussion. I don't want to sit around and listen to this kind of thing. I want a message that, hey, everything's all right. But it's got to be better than it was. My church, my religion, the kind of mystical groups I was in, it hadn't done it. Can you give it to me? That's what people still are looking for, except now the merry-go-round has gone around. And it would have to be now closer. Even though it sounds like it's going from one loop to another, it would sound like it's going back, even though I'm telling you it's got to get into the physics of it. People now, the need for life is to begin to experience the underlying fabric that no matter what door you open, it's into the same room. No matter what piece of carpet you seem to look at, and how far removed it seems to be from this one, or what piece of a puzzle, this is green, and this piece of the jigsaw puzzle is blue. There can't be a relationship. The physics of it is to directly see that there's nothing to say. Except by then you have got to have said almost everything in the world. You have got to have pursued almost every possible equation, every possible map. I do not mean that literally. You have got to have pursued, chewed, and digested more maps and equations than any other 4 or 5 million people put together to ever get to the point to see, and there's nothing to be said. Back going? This should be a new tattoo on your arm for a month or more. It should be on your arm until you understand it. To move from the world of the mathematics of it to where all of you properly should be, for this to really move one more step, to get to the physics of it. You can't ever, you must never resist or even ridicule life's manifestations toward its own expansion. No matter how crude and no matter how feeble they may be. And that is what everyone is confronted with. That is what everyone is surrounded with. And simultaneously, the same way life is structured, the attempts within the party room for life to expand itself are always met by other factions, by resistance to it, and if not overt physical resistance, ridicule. And then forget the fucking party, look inside yourself. It is the personal paradigm within the large underlying paradigm that you can be exposed to life, some segment of life, manifesting an attempted expansion and be totally overwhelmed by the currents running through you of just scoffing at it. And the forces, I sometimes label voices, but the current be running through you so strong that you can't even begin to stop it before it takes over, of just absolute ridicule at the whole idea that you just heard expressed. Idiots, fools. And it's life manifesting its own expansion. One that I found telling, just a fine example, some years back in education and psychology, some of you may remember they began to rename, such as finding children or even adults that seem to be mentally deficient, that something, whether they could diagnose it as being genetic, as they would call it, or whether it was environmentally inflicted in some way. But here we have a poor little tyke that he's just not going to make it in school. And 20 years ago, in the sphere of Alabama, throughout the world, at that part of the party, they had names for kids like that. They were not medical. They were not necessarily precise, but they were very descriptive, and everyone used them. Dunderhead, bullet brain. Just people referred to their own kids or some neighbor's kid. You know, this little Waldo, still got the intelligence of a walnut. Did he ever learn to read and write? Can he spit straight? And then they began to refer to them as underachievers. And as soon as somebody came up and referred to this group of people as underachievers, simultaneous to the party, as soon as somebody said, the underachievers, they were making a speech or talking to a group of people over here in the corner, and we said something about the underachievers, immediately, there were other people, and those other people were in you. I went, come on. You're going to change the name and call them underachievers, and they're still what they were, and you're making it sound better. That's proving nothing. And if you people weren't aware of it, there was much common written comment about that. That as soon as those kind of terms began to be used in psychology and education, instead of calling a kid a dunderhead, call him an underachiever. At the same time, as soon as somebody could say that at the very next issue of some magazine, some journal, somebody point out, listen, this is going too far. And we're distracting ourselves. People are playing around with words. We're not only ruining the English language. You're just trying to change the name of something, and you're not changing the something. Who are you fooling? Bunch of damn smart-aleck intellectuals, and you're doing nothing. And it's not true. They were doing something. Life was doing something. I picked that as one example to fit in with me saying that you should never resist, never, 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 or ridicule, no matter how feeble or crude the first attempts may seem to be. Because everywhere that life explores a new possibility of expansion in the party, and somebody comes up with something that may seem inane, that comes out maybe through just one voice at the party, and it just seems to be, I'll repeat inane since I've always liked that. It appears to be just foolishness, that this is nothing. That's why I use that example, that a good segment of the party said, wait a minute, you're going to take a situation that we all know exists, and you're going to change the name of it, like put a better name on it, and you haven't done a damn thing about the situation, and that's what's wrong with this country today. These damn woolly-brained intellectuals changing the name of something, and the situation's the same. It's insanity, or it's inanity, and it's not so. It is a very small, and it may be a very crude, and it may get sidetracked somewhere else. It may turn into something else, and it may be so feeble that the voice may get drowned out and it take another direction tomorrow or 2 hours later at another corner of the party. But you do not know until you taste it. It's not just negative, but I say the way you're killing yourself and keeping yourself where you are, but you also do not know until you've had enough experience of being freed from something to be able to not resist whatever life does to attempt to expand itself. I'm getting in again to the area where the words are not exactly true, but I'm going to say it. Is you can get to the point that you can see that this is not going to go in the direction it says it's going. This attempt is not going to be long-lived. But that's none of your business. Because you'd be one of the few people in this plant able to do that, to see it. And you know it can't be otherwise. But you do not know until you've been freed from it how it is to hear someone at the party, which we're talking about live, crying out, let's try this. And inside of you, as inside of another large segment there at the party, is the immediate, necessary need for somebody to ridicule this, to resist it, to go, shoo, and it not be you. As you have all noted, I am not much at trying to encourage pseudo-spiritualistic feelings in you, but you begin to get a continuing ability to do that, and you won't ever have any notions or any questions about what a real saint would be or what real goodness is. It's when you can see, or when, as far as you can tell, it may not go anywhere, and you're freed from resisting it. So whatever it is like still attempting to explore another possibility to grow. But since it cannot go in this one straight line, it is as filled with its own kind of self-doubt, misdirection, internal conflict as you are. Speaking of you as being an ordinary person. The only difference is in magnitude. The only difference is in time. The only difference is it is added into another dimension. And yet look, for every person on this planet, in the party, that has ever been driven to speak out and say, we should do this, let's all love one another, there is always, apparently, as far as ordinary consciousness can see, an equal number of people that's going to go, or we'll get up and shoot the guy that said that. When you begin to see this, if you want to remember this, I'll also point out, anytime you acknowledge within you resistance, you are assisting illness, stagnation, involution in life itself. Or if you like real quick, you're on the side of evil. I guess before tonight's out, so I should make the tape, I'm going to have to tell you people I didn't mean that thing about evil. So I'll wait until we get to the end. But before we get there, I'll tell you again. When you resist, you're assisting evil. All of you should have enough experience by now to have a kind of continuing awareness that within you, no matter how great you think you are at times, no matter how much you seem to be in favor of this, how faithfully you come here, that there is still within you the continuing, on schedule resistance to a large, large number of things in life. Just to suddenly hear on the news, television, or read something that seems to be a new plan for education, or somebody proposes in the Congress of this country, here's what we should do about some social program, and just as soon as you begin to read it, you know where it's going, and there's a current flows through you of, ooh, God damn those people, not them again. Politicians, them soreheads, smart alecks, fools running this country, fools running the world. You should be aware it's there. But to get through the first loop and into the second spherical loop, you've got to have a continuing awareness, but now, without me hanging here forever, it's got nothing to do with you. It's not your personal problem. That for everything that is suggested at the party, somebody's got to resist it. It's you and a whole bunch of people. And alternatively, when you resist theirs and you think, well, the way things should be is the way things used to be, back when I was growing up, then somebody's going to resist that. It is a continuing four-dimensional, non-ending dance. The closest you're going to come right now before I have to drag this into the physics of it and to go into a new level of nonverbal magic, the closest you're going to get to a kind of holiness that almost all of you had some kind of vague dream of, that you thought this sort of thing would be about, is being able not to resist life's most crude, life's most feeble, life's most temporary attempts to expand itself. Most of you would die happy there, I assure you. But to get there, of course, does require that you have a certain knowledge of the mathematics of it. To know that there is no such thing as evil, and to know that there is such a thing as evil. To know that things cannot grow without resistance. That things cannot go in a straight line, and that there is indeed a triad behind everything that goes on. Except until you see it all, and you can't resist it. There is nothing to resist. There is nothing to comment on. There's nothing to ridicule. There's the knowledge of there it is, and it's going to move. And its overall movement I've thrown about the term numerous times, I guess, about right angle, but how about a whole new heading for a paragraph in capital letters, the right angle surprise. It's still within the ballpark of neuralizing, but it's a little more active. To find out that you can always take a right angle from wherever your particular point of observation seems to be right now. Doesn't matter what it is, just what it seems to be, the way I'm looking at this, the way all the flow in me is telling me that this is the way it is you can find an absolute right angle to it, no matter what it is, without any question about, well, does this have any validity? Is there any basis? Is there even a bit of rationale to this? Should I pursue this further? Fuck it. If it's there, it's there. This is no consequence. As you go off at the right angle, and you will always find another dimension to what you thought you were observing. And of course, when it really operates, it has no connection to it. It's illogical, it's irrational, and it is a right angle surprise. It's like being able to stick your head in a door or in the window that you thought, well, here's what's involved with this. And you're able to look around, and there's a whole lot more going on than what you were looking at. But you can't keep looking at where your attention was already drawn. Well, sure you can. You're going to insist on being boring the rest of your life. Boring and upset, ulcers, dandruff. Popular, unpopular, and so on. I have noted throughout the years in literature and movies, I must have heard it recently somewhere. We'll play like I did. It was like a crime show or a crime movie. The guy was trying to track down how a certain event came about, trying to unravel this mystery, and someone told him he's having all these hardships and looking here and there, and sometimes successful and sometimes apparently otherwise. And this older detective or somebody said, well, you open enough doors and you'll find what you're looking for. Now, operating two, ordinarily referred to as three-dimensional world of man, literature, movies, that would apparently be quite valid, even more so than they said, even more so than the context of this would-be movie. But here it is, let's say that this one man is looking. I want to find out who killed my Aunt Sarah. Or I want to find out what caused this person to do that, what in their background. I want to unravel this mystery within the confines of this 90-minute movie. Open enough doors and you'll find what you're looking for. All right, within the confines of that, it's got to be true, of course, that the movie's got to get through and the good guys win. And evil will be overcome. Mysteries be cleared up. But you could expand that a bit and just say anything you wanted to know in life. If you opened enough doors, you'd find what you're looking for, right? I mean, literally. Open enough doors. And whatever it is you're looking for, it's got to be there, right? What seems to be lacking is open enough doors and be able to see, and you'd find what you're looking for. But that is never taken into account. The operational belief at the party is if you opened enough doors, you investigated enough, but if you open simply enough doors, you know what you're looking for. I'm looking for the murderer of my aunt. I'm looking for the meaning of life. I'm looking for an answer to the question, why do some people, or why does humanity have to suffer? You have a question, you have the puzzle. Would it not surely be true that if you open enough doors, you would find the answer? And I suggest to you most strongly it is a part of ordinary consciousness, not being required that the individual, any individual, be apparently religious or philosophical. But it is already inherent in consciousness that idea of opening enough doors and you'll find what you're looking for is true. It's simply true. If I wanted to learn how to do brain surgery, if I wanted to learn how to repair a television set, if I wanted to find out what is the meaning of life, and I wanted to devote myself to this, I put forth the effort, I opened enough doors. Of course, by doors, you know I'm saying everything, conversations, books, experiences, that if I open enough, I would find it. There's no doubt. It's just true. But is it? It is never taken into consideration, all right, open enough doors, but be able to see. And what if, as I continue to suggest to you, there is an underlying paradigmatic grid that all of this operates on? And that this idea of opening enough doors and you'd find what you're looking for as you continue to open a door, and then you open this door. And apparently, I'm getting more and more information. I've got this piece, I've got this piece, I've got a new piece of information over here. But how about the physics of it all? I'm suggesting most strongly, wherein there would be no three forces. If you could get your head inside of one door, and you look, and all the doors opened up on the same thing. It is, in a sense, I refer you back again to another possibility of a spherical loop apparently turning on itself, while not really. The old idea of a force majeure, of there being a force, the God. Science, quantum physics, of course, he's playing with the notion of finding, even though they still had it divided up, they're still playing with the mathematics of it, but still the continuing notion that floats through physics of the force, that there's got to be something that'll take gravitation, electromagnetic, it'll take everything, and it'll suddenly go, and we'll see it. that there'll be one force, that all these others will be kind of manifestations, there'll be little pieces of it, but suddenly it's got to be there, we're going to find it. Now at this level is what I was also hinting at, was that loop that I drew out the aisles of articulation, is now they're getting to a point that at one level, they're getting close to seeing what they're looking for. Although this doesn't sound reasonable, if they see it, then it's too late. Then everything's going to be on another level, and then there'll be new doors to open. The mystery will have changed. Insofar as what humanity has thought, has believed it was looking for, of the God, the forces, in a sense, physics is playing with it right now. It's about to close up a piece of the loop. It's about to hit a place where the merry-go-round is turning up one more notch. The idea of dividing things up, as particle physics is doing, into smaller and smaller pieces, and we'll get down to the piece that is indivisible, and that will be the door to the theorem, the force. Can you hear me just giving you a rough description of the way they describe it now? Is being able to get into at least one door. And their notion is, narrowing it down, that this is the smallest door possible. It is a door at such a level, at such a place, that there's not room for another door. At this level, that's the door, and once we look into it, it'll all become crystal clear. Just get your head inside of one door and to see that the floor is the same in all these doors. That no matter where you look, I never realized it. I couldn't see it. There seemed to be all this going on. Fights, parties, praying, dancing, reading, writing. And it's all in different doors, all in different locales. And you get your head in one door, and it's all one room. Everybody's standing on the same floor. Shouldn't it be at least encouraging to find out it's possible to do that without having to have 4 or 5 more years of college? To say the very least. Someone wrote this tonight, if you'd like to see coincidences again. I'll read it with no comment, most of it. Seems to me that life has at its disposal a marvelous machine for readjusting just about anything that may need it. The directed attention of humanity. Apart from the minor details, all that seems to be necessary to correct any gross imbalance in any area of life is to arrange for a sizable number of people to have their attention directed toward the matter. Of course, the pleasure of this is somebody now sees it on their own. In fact, this seems to be one of the primary mechanisms making it impossible for man to ever, quote, destroy the planet, making reference to that great thinker. I like to see myself quoted. Things can only go so far in one direction. By the way, I don't like to see myself quoted. I like to see somebody understand something, was the joke. Things can only go so far in one direction before it draws a sizable amount of attention, initiating a process of automatic correction. Right, in a sense, that just sounds to be just, as a matter of fact, as obvious as anything in the world. I mean, you hear that, an ordinary person would say, well, yeah, but so what? That, yeah, we can start, apparently humanity was destroying Lake Erie, or they're doing this to the environment, the ozone, and enough people realize it, and sure, we still got some degree of sanity on this planet. Enough people realize the problem, they did something about it. And you call this some kind of piece of philosophy? Somebody wrote this like this is important? Give us a break. And yet they don't understand it. As all of you know, including the person who wrote that, that's real hard to understand. You can understand it sometimes for a few seconds and then not understand it for a year. Well, being involved with very important and pressing matters, of course. And then for a few seconds you understand it again, and nothing could be clearer. It's almost silly to write it down. Until you forget it again for 6 months, while thinking that your life is coming apart. Never mind all this thing about the ecology of my personal life, my love life. Just the general feeling of the blues. And that seems as though a sizable number of forces in you recognizes the problem, and you bounce back. While forgetting from whence you bounce. I'm going to cut it there for the night.